Welcome to today's class. We're going to be looking at Hebrews chapter 13, verse 17. Let's read it together. It's only 2 lines. Obey your leaders and submit to them, for they are keeping watch over your souls as those who will have to give an account. Let them do this with joy and not with groaning, for that would be of no advantage to you. So we get in this first part, obey and submit. And this follows the household codes. If you Google household codes in Scripture, you'll get a lot of verses like Ephesians, Colossians, things like that, Titus, 1 Timothy, that talk about the codes that were expected or the roles that would play, let's say like husband, wife, children, these, and how the household was supposed to function, because Christianity really was a holistic thing that really hit every single aspect of our life. And so here, what we have is the same type of familial language in the household codes. What we have to understand is that we've talked about the church as body, but another doctrine of the church is church as family. And so when we think of church as family, the family unit is a representation of the church unit, because the church is described as family. And so when in, let's say, Ephesians, when you have the family unit, the father or the husband is the head of the home, and he is the chief sacrificer and the chief servant of the home, just as Jesus. In the church, he has the role of husband, and the church has the role of wife or bride. He is the chief sacrificer and the chief servant of this family unit. And then the wife, her role is to submit and to obey. You see that in Ephesians. And just as the church's role is to submit and obey to Jesus. Now, if you take that down to a microcosm of, let's say, a local church, then what you have is the overseers or the elders, or here the leaders, are the husband, and the church is the bride. And so the church then is supposed to obey and submit to the overseers or to the leaders. And so that is why, in 1 Timothy or in Titus, you get that the overseers are supposed to be male, because it is a familial understanding of the church. And so if the church is family and we have structure for family, that structure continues with the church all the way back up to God the Father, right? And so we see at a local level in the church, and as we expand out, we get it all the way to the macro level with God as Father. And those two words are the words that are described the role of giving ourselves over to the ones who are chief sacrificers and chief servants. And so we get a little, even though he's not explicitly spelling that out, we see that throughout all of the other epistles whenever we go over household codes, and other places, in like 1 Peter, when we're talking about what leadership is supposed to look like. But he says, and keeping watch over your souls as those who have to give account. And that's the service sacrifice part of the leadership. For their job, they are serving and sacrificing in a way where they have to keep watch over the church. So my job is to keep watch over the hearts of people, and I take that very seriously. That's why we take very seriously our doctrine. We take very seriously how we read the scriptures, how we interpret the scriptures, who can preach, who can be in leadership, who can do all of these things, because it's incredibly important. And it's so important that they will have to give an account. So I will have to give an account with how I lead the church that I pastor. And that is scary at the end of the day. If I'm the one that has to give an account with what God has given me and how I've stewarded that, I need to make sure that my conscience is clear, and we're going to talk more about that tomorrow, that the author of Hebrews is wanting to lead with a clear conscience. But I have to give an account and make sure that my conscience is clear in what I teach, and how I lead, and what responsibilities I delegate to people, and what doctrine I allow to flourish in the church. And so it's not just a simple of like, oh, my leader may be a stickler, or I don't know why they care so much about this. It's because we are responsible. We are responsible for what we allow to be cultivated in the church. And if that is the case, with that responsibility, I will have to be held accountable to God for all that I do and how I lead. And so in that way, I serve and care for the body and sacrifice, because it is a great sacrifice to lead and to serve. And so we see this, how I always like to see it in Scripture, as one is humiliating themselves while being elevated by the other. And so I humiliate myself as Jesus did by serving and sacrificing, but then the church will elevate its leaders by obeying and submitting. Is the exaltation. And so the church by obeying and submitting humiliates itself, but then the leaders by serving and sacrificing elevate the church. And so it's this beautiful cycle back and forth of loving and caring. This is how marriage relationships are supposed to look like. Leadership, local church leadership is supposed to look like. This is how Jesus and the bride and the church's family looks like. This is how God the Father works and has instituted kind of these rules for us. And so then it says, let them do this with joy and not with groaning, for that would be of no advantage to you. So I think this is a call for the church to really think about how it portrays leadership. And I'll talk a little bit about this because I hit on this a little bit when we talked about imitating leaders. But there is this saying that it's a relationship and not a religion. And that has really come out of this push against authority. And so there's been a lot of studies, after World War II and the militarization of young men, and then them coming back into the workforce, kind of this military understanding of authority. And then, you have the sexual revolution, hippie movement, all these things that were anti-authority, anti-establishment, and with that came anti-religion. And out of that movement, you have this saying that happened, oh, it's not a religion, it's a relationship. And what that has done, actually, I used to say that saying like everybody else, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized this is actually hurtful for the church. Because when we define those words, religion, really what we mean is like established authority, and we mean what people are talking about is like, it may mean like the Catholic Church, Orthodox Church, but just the established church. And so how that plays out at a local church is like, oh, you have no authority over me, I'm not going to obey, I'm not going to submit. That's an archaic view of how to do church, really anti-establishment, and it's really just an individual relationship between me and God. And I may go to your church as a consumer because I like the way you preach, or I like the worship, or I find friends there, but there isn't really an establishment of authority that the leadership has over my life. And it's done a lot of harm in the church because then we really don't get to push away bad doctrine. Now we have this understanding where I can really learn from whoever and get poured into from wherever. And the pros of kind of the internet is, man, there's a lot of great study, there's a lot of good tools out there, and I can find if there's, say, bad doctrine or toxic leadership in the place I'm at, and find somewhere good. But the bad of that is, well, now we really don't have to submit to anybody, and we don't have to obey or walk in spiritual authority at all in my life. And that's actually really dangerous and really antithetical to how the entire New Testament church, from its very conception, was set up. And as you read for the first couple hundred years, it was huge problems in what would happen as authority was not submitted to and obeyed and established in the church. And so I want us to caution as we read this against cultural sayings that really take away from the authority of the church. And of course, there's been authority that has been abused. There's been authority that's toxic and that's not good. We are talking about a healthy church, a healthy place. We should be excited to submit to good spiritual authority. And if you aren't or you can't, then you really should take some introspection in why that is, and wrestle with God on this scripture. It is very clear to obey and to submit and to make the lives of the people that are leading you a joy. So that means you are not leaning into complaining. You are not always combative when it comes to spiritual authority, or when decisions are made or when things happen. That there's not a root of bitterness in your heart when someone asks you to do something. All of these ways, if you make it a joy, the understanding of the scriptures is that authority has been placed in your life by God, whether that's governmental authority or spiritual authority in the church, and our role is to submit to that as long as it doesn't violate our conscience and what God has told us to do, and to walk in that well. And so I want to challenge our very Western American understandings of authority and religion, so that we can live into a more biblical understanding of what authority and the church should look like in our lives, and to ponder what it would mean to obey and to submit because of the big role that they have and they are accountable to God for, and then to help them doing it with joy and not with groaning, because honestly, at the end of the day, that just hurts the church. If the church members make the life of the church leaders impossible, that creates a lot of unhealthy, bad situations. And so both people have to really look at how the leader leads and how the church submits. Where is your heart in that? And then going from there. That's it for today. Our next class, we are going to be finishing Hebrews. Thanks for coming along on this journey.